All right, we are going to get started on today's session. Quick overview of our agenda for the day. Let's see if I can get the screen to do what I'd like it to. There we go. So our agenda today, we're going to do a quick overview of the Oregon Safe Routes to School Network and Leadership Committee, a bit more about this series, this being the first of 3 and what's coming up next. Our friends at ODOT are going to give a quick overview of the Safe Routes to School program, things that are coming up in their program. And then we'll talk with Demi about the Changing Ease enforcement engagement from the Safe Routes Partnership. We'll wrap it up with some next steps as far as the upcoming meetings. I am going to pass it off then to Janice to talk more about the network and the leadership committee.
Great. Thank you, Noelle. So if you want to go ahead and get to the next slide, please.
I'm working on that. For some reason, it's not.
I do want to make a point, just to point out that today's meeting is put on by the Oregon Safe Routes to School Network. And I'll explain the difference as soon as the slide comes up between ODOT, Safe Routes to School, and the network. I feel like we should have a commercial. All right, well, I'm just going to start talking. So, as you can imagine, the Oregon Safe Routes to School is made up of everyone in Oregon that works on safe routes, and it has a lot of different players. And so some of those players are our friends at, thank you, at ODOT with their Oregon Safe Routes to School program, which you'll hear about in a few minutes from Leanne. But we also have our local and regional Safe Routes to School programs, which can include anybody that's working on Safe Routes to School, including our engineers, our teachers, parents, anybody, practitioners, like a lot of you. And then we have our Safe Routes to School network. And that actually started out as kind of an email list of whoever wants to hear about our Safe Routes to School program here in Oregon. They don't actually have to be practicing Safe Routes to School practitioners or anybody. It can be just someone who wants to be informed about us. And then we have the leadership committee. And this is a group of people that convene the network members like we're doing today for the meetings. We also send out emails to you so that you can hear about news that's going on around the state. And then we advocate for the Safe Routes to School programs. Next slide, please. I just want to quickly share our vision and our mission statement. So I'm not going to read it to you because I think everyone will anyways. We aim to create a future where all students and families can safely use active and shared transportation options for the school commute. I don't know what happened to my slide, but and then the next slide is our mission, where again the Safe Routes to School Network and Leadership Committee support schools and communities throughout Oregon in order to increase the number of youth using active and shared transportation options for the school commute. And we wanted to make sure that we use shared in there to think through school busing, carpooling, things of that sort. And then the next slide, please. Great. So as I said, one of the things that the Leadership Committee does is organize the Safe Routes to School annual meetings. And this year, since we're not in person, we needed to do a series of meetings. So we have 3 different meetings. The first one is today. Next slide. And then we have a part 2 where we're going to be pulling together planning for the 2021 school year. That's next week. So make sure you register if you haven't already. And we'll have people presenting. Noelle will be presenting about the toolkit that Metro is putting together. We will have Leah, our practitioner from Beaverton, coming in and talking about the national partnerships back to school working group that she is participating on. And then we will have Whitney from Commute Options telling us some of the things that they're thinking about doing for the next upcoming school year. And then for part 3, we've started as a leadership committee creating regional groups so that people have a support group for their area to bounce ideas off of or to brainstorm like what are they going to do upcoming school year. So we will have people from those regional groups present some of the ideas that they have developed for the upcoming school year, and that's October 19th. So I know I went through that fast. We will take questions at the end on this information or comments also, but I'd like to go ahead and pass it on to Leanne Ferguson from ODOT.
All right, great. And so this is a sort of a moment in time for me and my colleague Heidi Manlove to introduce ourselves as your ODOT Safe Routes to School program managers. I think you can move on to the next slide, Noel. Great, perfect. So at ODOT, our program is divided into actually 2 separate divisions. So you get 2 of us to work with at the state level. The Oregon Department of Transportation. So you'll see from this slide that we've got about $1 million a year in our ODOT Safe Routes to School Education and Engagement program that's run by my colleague Heidi Manlove, and I'll pass it over to her in just a second. And then we have $10 million a year annually for our ODOT Safe Routes to School construction program, which is the program that I manage. And you'll see from this chart sort of like what's involved in each of those programs at a really high level. So I'm actually going to pass it off to Heidi really quickly to give about a 1-minute overview of the resources that the education program has available for you, and then I'll talk for about 1 minute on for the next slide. So stay on this slide for now, and Heidi, can you unmute yourself and video so everyone can see your face?
Hi, everyone. I actually don't have my video going.
Okay.
But
I should have included a picture of you, so at least I would know. But well, anyway, next time.
Yeah. But so looking at who's signed up for this, I can see most of you guys are aware of our programs, but this will be good for the recorded version for anyone that isn't. So I work out of the safety division, and so we focus a lot on education, encouragement, engagement programming. So this includes competitive grants, which is a large part of the budget, and then about 40% of our budget goes to general statewide technical assistance, which includes what you know as the Walk and Roll program and the Jumpstart program, as far as also to our website, the Oregon Safe Routes to School website. And we also do technical assistance in terms of program development, like curriculum, resources, developing a curriculum, developing more custom resources for practitioners, such as the template for the action plan. So right now we have action plan templates, but we're also working on trying to develop things like a district-wide action plan template, or trying to embrace all the different types of programming that there is out there. And so we try to be as diverse as possible to incorporate all different types of needs. So urban and rural communities, also too thinking more about what is difference in programming for coastal communities. So we're a developing program. Obviously we've just had the $1 million the last few years. Before that, it was less than $500,000. So we're rapidly growing and trying to play catch up with all the excitement. Is there anything else that you wanted me to cover, Leanne?
Nope, that's it. I know we only
Okay.
have like 2 minutes, so if you can move to the next slide, I'll do a quick update on the construction side. Thanks, Heidi. Thanks, perfect. So from the construction side, we do have a competitive grant as well for construction programs, and that's sort of already in motion. We will be able to allocate about $26 million by the end of this year for construction projects around within a 1 mile radius of schools. We're going to build things like crosswalks, sidewalks, rapid flashing beacons. We ran this competition about 2 years ago as well, and we got to fund about 24 grantees from around the state. So they're currently working on building a lot of those projects. So we have that competitive grant program, but the one I really wanted to focus on today is a planning assistance program that we have that we are currently accepting applications for. You can apply by August 31st. And school districts and cities can apply for this grant. So it's not really a grant, actually. It allows us to send a consultant to your community to work with your road authority, which is the entity that owns the roads around your school, as well as your school district, and have a sort of a public process around creating a prioritized list of safe routes to school projects for that school. As well as a prioritized list of the safe routes to school programs that you think that the community believes is needed for that school. That plan will also include a list of potential funding sources and grant opportunities so that your community can have a better grasp on what your plan is and what your opportunities are for the future. So you can email me, or you can go to the ODOT Safe Routes to School page or the OregonSafeRoutes.org page. The easiest way to get to the ODOT page is to Google ODOT Safe Routes to School, and then click through that for the project identification program. I'm also happy to talk to anybody more about this. I also want to say I don't expect this program to be that competitive. We have enough money to address a lot of communities, and we haven't reached in the past, we haven't been oversubscribed on that program. So this is a great opportunity to talk to your road authority, again, the entity that owns the roads around your school and your school district, and fill out this pretty easy application for this program. And there's a high likelihood that you would get this assistance to make a safe route to school plan. Over time. Thank you all very much.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Leanne and Heidi. And again, yeah, if there's questions, put them in the chat. We'll try to touch base on those at the end, or we'll follow up with you after the session if there are questions that Leanne and Heidi can answer for you. Again, thanks so much. And we're going to jump into our main discussion for today's session, which is the changing ease of safe routes to school. Back in June, the Leadership Committee released a statement kind of committing to some specific actions around elevating the need for safe routes to school to address racial justice in our programming. And one of the first actions that we identified was supporting a statewide conversation around the decision at the Safe Routes Partnership to replace the enforcement E with engagement, and what that might look like for our local programs here in Oregon. So we are super excited to have Demi Espinoza with us today from the Safe Routes Partnership here to share more with us about the process at the national level and facilitate a discussion with you all today. Demi is the daughter of working class Mexican immigrants, the youngest in a family of 10 children, and raised in Riverside, California. She received a BA in sociology from Cal State San Bernardino and is currently pursuing a master's degree in urban sustainability and a certification in spatial analysis for geographic information systems from Antioch University. Demi brings 15 years of policy and organizing experience related to racial equity, environmental justice, and transportation equity. Over the last 6 years, she has served as the Senior Equity and Policy Manager for Safe Routes National Partnership, where she works on active transportation issues throughout the Southern California region. Prior to Safe Routes, Demi worked at Basic Rights Oregon, the Coalition of Communities of Color, and the Native American Youth and Family Center here in Portland. So we are super excited to have her with us. Oh, sorry, I missed a slide there. And I'm going to hand it off to Demi to start her presentation. Thanks.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Noelle and Janice, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm Demi Espinosa, and I'm calling in today from traditional and unceded Tongva territory, also known as Los Angeles, California. And like Noelle said, I've been with the partnership for the last 6 years. And so, I'm really excited to talk about the evolution of Safe Routes to School programming. I just want to start off by also acknowledging and thinking of Portland's community right now as y'all are enduring a violent occupation of federal officers. And so just want to say that, we are in solidarity of the Black Lives movement, Black Lives Matter movement, and the racial justice advocates in around Portland, Oregon. And so we are thinking of your communities, and so want to share that we are in solidarity with you. And so to start off our presentation today, I wanted just to also kind of share with you some expectations you might have for the presentation. So please expect that I'm going to speak today from my personal experience and reflect the values of Safe Routes Partnership. What you shouldn't expect today is all the answers. We are developing the toolkit around dropping enforcement because we really believe in community safety. And, we are working with partners locally and nationally to be able to shape a Safe Routes non-infrastructure program that prioritizes Black, Indigenous, people of color, and racial justice. And so we are, really looking forward to hearing all of you today. So we'll have a little bit of discussion, and let's get started. So you can click the next slide. Perfect. So just kind of a little brief agenda. I wanted to talk about who we are and why Safe Routes to School is important, the history of Safe Routes to School's ease, and then we're going to dive a little bit into the traditional role that police have played in Safe Routes to School non-infrastructure programming, why policing and enforcement is problematic. We'll talk about some opportunities that arise when we talk about alternatives to enforcement and ending contracts with police. We dropped the enforcement E, but we actually added an engagement E. And then we'll have 2 discussions focused really on the question of dropping the enforcement E and then engagement. So if you can please hold your questions then. So organizational expertise, I'll move through this really quickly. So we are a national nonprofit, and many of the participants might have already worked with us in the past, but we work locally and nationally to advance Safe Routes to School, walking and biking strategies to improve the health and well-being of children of all races, income levels, and abilities. And we really want to foster the creation of healthy communities for everyone. And so, we prioritize community engagement, land use and school siting, equity, environmental justice. And so each community around the country is very different and is experiencing different challenges and different opportunities. So, we have quite a bit of staff around the country. In Oregon, in your state, we have Kari and Becky I know is here with us today, my colleague. So we are just really excited to be able to do this work locally and nationally. You can do next slide. So just kind of starting off, I love to have this slide in every single presentation I do in order to ground us in the same philosophy around why Safe Routes to School programming is important. Communities with higher income tend to have the infrastructure that make communities feel safe to be able to walk and bike. You'll see 90% of higher affluent incomes have sidewalks. 75% of them have lighting. And when we talk about injuries and fatalities, it is really low income and communities of color that are suffering from the lack of investment. And we see here children killed while walking. Black communities are twice as likely. Latinx communities are also 40% more likely. And so this is a huge disparity that we really need to address in every single aspect of work that we do. Next slide. So let's talk about the E's. And so how the E's support programming, practitioners, parents, and students. You know, over the last 15 years, Safe Routes to School programs across the nation have used the 5 E's, which are education, encouragement, enforcement, evaluation, and engineering. That's been the organizational framework, and it's really been foundational to develop Safe Routes to School plans. And it's been used as a universal checklist to define the Safe Routes to School initiative and make sure that we're covering all our bases necessary to get kids to walk in their neighborhoods in a healthy and safer manner. In 2015, Safe Routes Partnership added the 6th E, which is equity, to bring focus, kind of the data that I talked about in the previous slide, around creating healthy and thriving communities. But what is really, really important about the equity component is that we really wanted to make jurisdictions prioritize in their methodology as they're choosing schools to work with communities that have seen decades of disinvestment in not just infrastructure and what we think of sidewalks or crosswalks or flashing beacons, but also the social infrastructure, the really important component of why we do this work, which is a Safe Routes to School program, an encouragement program. So equity is really kind of our driving force, and it really helps us ensure fair and equitable outcomes for students with disabilities, low-income students, BIPOC communities, female students, LGBT, queer students, and students who speak a language other than English. And so this is really kind of the foundation, is making sure that we're thinking about all kind of demographic groups. And I've talked a little bit about the E's and how they're very important, and I don't want to go through each one just because of time, but really focus on what the evolution of why we're here today. You can change the next slide, which is enforcement. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the traditional role of police and Safe Routes to School. So how has police and enforcement traditionally been integrated in Safe Routes to School programming? Well, locally here, we've seen a lot of schools and school districts partner with either sheriffs or police department on a variety of projects. Number one, temporary demonstration projects for Safe Routes to School, as maybe schools are kind of testing out what infrastructure remedies might work for them. They use and partner police in creating that temporary demonstration, or sometimes people call it urban tactical projects. We've seen police be involved in Walking Wednesdays, where they'll shepherd students to school, to and from school. We've seen them be involved in things called bike rodeos, where they're helping students learn about walking and biking safety and bike skills. And we've also, probably most commonly have seen them be involved in the enforcement of traffic laws around a Safe Routes to School site. And I think, this is important to mention because there's a lot of contracts that are tied to police involvement. And so that's something that we really wanted to analyze when we were thinking about the traditional role of police in Safe Routes. The other point I wanted to make was the role of police in schools in general. So there's quite a bit of school districts that have safety resource officers or have their own school police department. And so kind of want to draw a couple of examples. Where I am, the Los Angeles Unified School District has the second largest school police department in the country, with the second biggest budget in the country, followed after Miami-Dade. They have a $7 million budget, although they have had a recent budget cut of $25 million. Their school police force is huge. They have 350 sworn police officers, 126 non-sworn school safety officers. And some of the things that they're charged with happen to be in schools that are not maybe safe routes to school. A lot of them are in junior high schools, high schools, and they also do things like random searches. They have been known to pull students out of classrooms to search their belongings. You know, they have been known to target Black and brown students and really dehumanize children in the educational space. You know, one example of an advocacy group that is working against school police and really wanting to defund but reinvest this huge budget into you know, educational spaces and invest in Black and brown students is an organization that I'll mention later called Students Deserve in Los Angeles. And so I wanted to kind of mention these two as like the traditional role of police is how perhaps practitioners have interacted with them. I'm going to largely focus today on the role of police in safe routes to school, which is the first point. And I think, you know, ending school district contracts with police is a very longer discussion. And, you know, we're having that discussion internally. And so that's something that we definitely want to return to at some point. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about what's the problem with police in schools. So, you know, the first is this idea of how how police uphold structural racism and decades of social and built infrastructure disinvestment. It really, having police involved in safe routes to school programming exacerbates inequities of the decades of social and built infrastructure development. For example, a lot of police have been known to target Black and brown drivers near schools. So these could be parents dropping off their children. For one example that I can point to is, you know, in the picture in this slide is a community that I work with in, it's a rural environmental justice community that I work with in San Bernardino County. Largely 82% Latinx families live in this community. And, you know, as we were doing a Safe Routes to School action plan, we did a workshop with them. We're going through the 6 E's. And I heard a lot of parents really talk about their concerns with enforcement. They've seen other school districts have a partnership with them, and a lot of the parents in this community happen to be undocumented, may or may not have driver's license. And so when they're dropping their kids off from school or walking their children to school, that is something that they're deeply afraid of. When we know, at least in my community, that a lot of the sheriff and police departments have contracts with ICE. And so this racial profiling really is exposes a deep structural racism and targeting of Black and brown students and their parents, and really criminalizes these parents for decades of disinvestment that we have seen in this community. For example, there is a lack of stop signs. There is a lack of crosswalks. The lack of a lot of built environment infrastructure that would actually make it safer for students to walk and bike, and for drivers to change their behavior. And, you know, I've heard a lot in this community. One of the biggest concerns was on speed reduction measures. Like, how can we have a built environment of infrastructure in place so that there are these infrastructure clues for drivers to exhibit more safe behavior. And you know, the last point I really want to make, actually 2 more points I want to make on this slide, is that putting police near schools to enforce traffic laws doesn't address driver behavior long term. You know, we've cited studies, and I'm happy to share those references after their presentation, that it doesn't actually change driver behavior around schools during that time when police officers are pulling over drivers for their bad behavior. But it doesn't really change the culture of drivers, you know, exhibiting speedy behavior along schools. And so a better route is to encourage educational programs that target drivers. And so, this slide is really one of the most important slides in the presentation, because the point I want to make is that police officers near schools doesn't necessarily make communities safer for all of these reasons: racial profiling, driver behavior, and it doesn't really address the systematic disinvestment that a lot of communities have seen. You can click to the next slide. So what are alternatives to policing and safe routes to school? So when we came to this decision, this is something that we've thought about for many years. And, we've had a lot of practitioners, community members, and advocates come to us and really applaud us for dropping the enforcement. But in a way, this is a long time coming. This is something that we should have addressed a long time ago. But I think with the courageous uprisings of racial justice advocates, particularly from the Black Lives Matter movement, we've really seen this conversation come to the national stage, to the local stage. And so I'm really excited that we're moving in this direction. And so here's an opportunity to talk about alternatives to policing and safe routes to school. So what opportunities come up from dropping enforcement and ending contracts with police? Well, we have an opportunity to support the leadership of parents and volunteers. For example, I've talked a lot about what the role traditionally has been for police with bike rodeos, walking Wednesdays, and those are roles that are better suited, frankly, to be fulfilled through the leadership of parents and volunteers through community-based organizations. So the money that's being invested in contracts with police could be going directly back to the community through paying parents to be a part of the program, paying volunteers to be a part of the program, and strengthening relationships with community-based organizations. Another opportunity, like I said, is investing in educational programs. So we have our Metropolitan Planning Organization locally here in the Southern California area. It's called SCAG. They have developed a program called Go Human, and that's the picture that you'll see on the right. They've invested in educational programs that target driver behavior. And they've worked with local community members, local school districts, and nonprofit organizations like the Partnership in personalizing messaging that is culturally specific, that is in accessible languages. And so this is an example from the Muscoy Sidewalks for Safety program that I mentioned as a rural Latinx community. And then we also have the opportunity to advocate for funding streams to actually divest from enforcement. So a lot of concern that I've heard so far from practitioners is they get their money from places like the Office of Traffic and Safety, which is dollars that are from enforcement, right? Ticketing, speeding, and things like that. So this is an opportunity to really be creative in where we're getting our money from that is not targeting Black and brown drivers, that is not targeting Black and brown pedestrians or cyclists. So, we have an opportunity to also kind of talk to our jurisdictions, like the Office of Traffic and Safety, and really revision a funding stream that is equitable and just. And you can change the next slide. And I spoke a little bit about this, the opportunities to focus on built environmental infrastructure change. So let's really think about this as an opportunity to address remedies for long-term speed reduction measures. So the example that I keep returning to is the community I work with, Muscoy, which is the pictures you'll see on the right. This community has been wanting speed tables, speed bumps, crosswalks, not police. And so, it's, as advocates, we are putting the pressure on our public works department to reinvest in these communities and reinvest in infrastructure that actually will make things safer. And so this is I feel like I've really spoke to this point, but the opportunity to support community resiliency and connected programs and work with community-based organizations. And this is the opportunity to really solidify and elevate those relationships who have trusted a trusted and respected, respected relationship with community members who have been there, not just to work on safe routes to school, but many other concerns that parents might have. So this is the opportunity to actually elevate those relationships. And most importantly, moving away from police supports Black Lives Matter in school. And that's the point that, we really want to emphasize here. You can click to the next slide. So if we were to drop engagement, if we were to drop enforcement nationally in our local programs, we have a very distinctive opportunity to add engagement in Safe Routes to School programming. So what does that actually mean? It means that we are looking at addressing community engagement and really listening to folks on the ground, listening to parents. It means meaningful engagement, and that is essential to creating a sustainable and successful program. You really want to not just listen to concerns of parents, but actually implement them in your action plan, implement them in your infrastructure plans. And this engagement means building Safe Routes to School leaders and champions. We've seen in Muscoy for the last 3 years how we've really invested in building a movement that is led by the parents and students themselves. And they are bought into Safe Routes to School, and they are the voices of it and are champions of it. They're bringing elected officials, they're having those conversations, and so they have ownership of what the Safe Routes to School program looks like, and have really wonderful ideas of creatively thinking about how to get students walking and biking safely, whether that's engaging in a clean air day, engaging in environmental justice, but it's allowed them this space to also think about how to improve and create healthier communities beyond walking and biking. Thinking about creating healthy communities for environmental justice, improving air quality. So it's just been really amazing to see when you have a program that's led by parents and students, and you have the shared vision of what that program is. So there's a lot of opportunity with adding engagement and prioritizing that in your action plan. So if you can click to the next slide, please. So here's a list of resources that the National Partnership has released. I wanted to add here the announcement from our Executive Director, Cass Isidro, on dropping the Enforcement E. And we have a series of publications at the intersection of active transportation and equity, which has a lot of great data around why we need to prioritize working with communities that have been disinvested. That includes BIPOC communities, and it really gets to the engagement piece as why that should be a priority. And then we have another recent publication of protecting Black lives in parks and public spaces, which is a very important one. And then I wanted to also highlight a news article that was written by my colleague Becky, who is here joining us today, on solidarity with police-free schools in the Salem and Kaiser area of Oregon. And so those are kind of the things that we have released so far, but there's some more resources I highly recommend looking at. Some of the resources from Untokening. They are a BIPOC-led group that has conducted a series of transformative talks on the topic of equity and mobility justice. And so they have some really great webinars that I suggest folks watch. And lastly, I talked about Students Deserve, which is an LA-based youth-led organization who has successfully reduced the LAUSD police budget, and are working on, quite a bit of things, and Safe Passages is going to be one of them. So they're just a very inspirational group that I highly recommend taking a look at. And then to our, I think this is we're getting to the end here, and you can click the next slide. This conversation is not ended, right? We are currently working on toolkits to address alternatives to enforcement, to highlight strategies for engaging communities, and we really need your help. So when I was asked to present today, I really see it as this opportunity to also hear from practitioners on the ground of things that you might be facing, opportunities or challenges as you're considering dropping enforcement or having these important conversations within your community, and we definitely need your help to do so. So I wanted to, for our next, we got about 15 minutes, right? We have, two discussion items. So the first I wanted to talk about is enforcement and safe routes to school. And I have these prompted questions to kind of get you thinking about how, what your relationship with police has been in safe routes to school programming. How can those be better fulfilled or suited for parent volunteers to fulfill these roles? What important conversations need to happen in order to confront the harm of police and safe routes to school? I know, this could be a very delicate issue for some and a very important and critical and timely issue. So we're going to talk about enforcement and then we'll switch over to engagement. But I wanted to stop right here to perhaps if you have things that you want to talk about in the chat room or kind of chime in, and love to hear your thoughts about how enforcement has played out in your safe routes to school programs.
Okay. Kirsty, thank you so much, Demi. That was an amazing presentation, and it really helped, I think, frame why the National Partnership made the changes and really supports those changes and helps us figure out how to have those conversations. I know that our Portland Safe Routes to School program does actually we have funding through the tickets that are given from our police. That has been going down much more, but not because people aren't giving tickets, it's because we have less police giving tickets. So and just to start off the conversation, like we haven't necessarily had police involved as much, seeing how we have so few and they will do more around the speeding. Everyone's like, we want police officers. Not everyone, right? So it really depends on what the school is and what the school community is. But I love this idea of really bringing in families to create the program and alternatives to enforcement and seeing what kind of education we can do for the families and the people driving by. Kirsty, do we have any questions or comments in the chat? And then we can open it up for everyone to either make a comment or ask a question, and let's have a conversation around these.
Yeah, we've got one question in the chat, and if this person wants to unmute themselves and ask, you're welcome to do that. The question is, do you have any research you could share regarding automated enforcement of speeding around schools?
Yes, that's something that we've talked about in some of our safe routes to school programs in San Bernardino County. I think there's been a big shift to have automated speed enforcement cameras. And, we are looking into that because there also is some privacy issues that we hear from parents as well. And so I can get back to you if I'll have to look into see if there's research around that. It's definitely a conversation that we've been having in San Bernardino and then also internally at the partnership. So I will ask some colleagues if they have some resources, and I'd be happy to share.
Great. And we can also include a list of resources when we send out the recording to everybody. So Demi, if you want to send those to us, we'll put them all into one email along with the ones that were on your slide. That would be great. Okay. Anybody else have a question or comment? If you want to raise your hand or unmute yourself or post it in the chat. This is
And
not
there's-
usually my group.
And if there's no questions about enforcement
Yeah.
at the moment, we can go to the next slide, which is around engagement. But
Okay,
whatever the group feels like doing.
excellent. Emma, did you have a question or comment?
I do. Thank you so much for this presentation. I'm really glad that there is more dialogue happening around this. There are some pieces that seem clear to me, and yet there's others that it's like, well, what does this really look like? So some of the things that come to mind are, for instance, we installed bike lanes close between two schools here in Springfield, Oregon, and then there was parking in the bike lanes. And we didn't actually have any police involvement in that, but trying to figure out how do we uphold some of the laws that provide that safe, continuous walking and biking facility once it's built, so that students can actually use it and parents don't have to be concerned about their student biking down the bike lane, but then there's parked cars along it and then they're weaving in and out, and you can just see that playing out. There's also been some other schools where through the Safe Routes conversations with the action plan, they actually wanted more of there are two school resource officers across the entire school district of 20 different schools. And they wanted the school resource officer to be a little bit more involved with some of the parking and circulation flow in the parking lot, because there are some parents who just weren't respecting the authority of either parent volunteers or the school principal. So I don't think just a totally hands-off approach is the answer, but I'm wondering which engagement tools and approaches would successfully create safe environments and support the Safe Routes mission while not having such a heavy policing emphasis.
Yeah, I mean, that is a very heavy question, right? I think a lot of communities feel torn because if there are particularly drivers who are disobeying traffic rules along safe routes around the school, how can we create this healthy balance of, creating a safe space where police are not, in the school and educational environment, and how do we, enforce traffic laws? And I think now is an opportunity to be kind of a little bit creative about that. This may not be the answer, but I just want to bring up, some of the conversations that we've been having with our MPO, SCAG, is thinking about, kind of and this is coming off of the open streets conversation that we've had, and I'm sure maybe this is kind of, this kind of tactic has happened in Oregon as well, is the closure of streets. And so, one discussion that we're having at the MPO level is closure around a safe routes to school, kind of like a car-free zone. And that's something that we're thinking about creatively, because that also, supports this idea of not having police enforcement in a school area. And so, that could be something that we are looking into. We'd like to do at some point some type of pilot project. And, I've been trying to push our MPO to consider that, doing these temporary demonstration projects where what would happen if we did a car-free zone near a school, that would enable students to walk and bike freely to get to school, and only have it open for, school buses, or students with disabilities and drivers with disabilities. So that kind of thing, that's one option. But another kind of creative thought is we are heavily investing in some of our educational programs with the help of our MPO and our parent volunteers. But that, that's such an interesting conversation to have, is how do we have sustainable parent volunteers? And I think there needs to be a concerted effort to have paid volunteers to fulfill those roles, and to have more of a community cohesion. So that's kind of a question that's definitely evolving, and we're thinking of answers to. But yeah, I'd love to kind of keep thinking about thinking through that and using some of these pilot project opportunities to see if that really, addresses a concern. And there's a question in the chat from Hannah. Feel free to unmute yourself, or I can also read your question. It looks like she said, I'm interested in learning more about paying parents and volunteers for their time and skills in supporting Safe Routes to School. In schools, what would or could this look like in practice? That's a really great question. And I want to turn back to kind of what we're doing locally in a rural environmental justice community in Muscoy. We've been able to get a grant from our California Air Resources Board to do some educational Safe Routes to School programming. And one of the things that we were really committed to is really bringing in student and parent volunteers, but paying them for their time. And it's, sometimes that's not an eligible cost. And so that's kind of where our advocacy hat kind of comes in, is really pushing some of these funding streams to value the time of parents and students. So in that application, we were able to, we are going to hire a part-time student intern to not only, pay her for her time as we're developing the Safe Routes to School action plan, but, to also give her some of the skills around creating a Safe Routes to School action plan, creating some skills around land use planning, and how, jurisdictional budgetary operates, how those operate. So I think putting that in a line item for your budget for grants is so important. I'm seeing that become a little bit more common. For example, our MPO SCAG has quite a bit of mini grants where they're paying CBOs for their time to do some of these work. And so, it's really kind of changing the paradigm that we can ask parents to be involved and not pay them. And I think that, we really need to push back against that and start valuing their time as, important visionary in making sure this Safe Routes to School program is successful. But we're running out of time. Let's see, there's another question here. It says, I wish we could actually pay crossing guards so it isn't just the financially well-off schools that can have parent volunteers and resources to staff the crossings. Absolutely. There's very few crossing guards in some of the areas I work with. And so that is absolutely a problem. And I think, we've been trying to build relationships with some of the school board members and make this a priority because depending on your, the way your community is set up, crossing guards may be paid from the school board, it may be paid from the city, it may be paid from the county. So kind of, really ensuring that our elected officials know how important that is. And so I know we've got a minute left, so I just wanted to, my contact info is up. And I just want to say you probably have a lot more questions than, then you're walking away with answers. And that's definitely the point. This is a ongoing conversation. So we never promised you all the answers because I think this is a conversation that we need to have collaboratively because so many communities are in different spaces in terms of where they are with relationships with enforcement. And so I encourage you to reach out to me or Becky or Kari, who are your Oregon representatives. And we want to come back as we're developing the toolkit. In terms of a timeline for a toolkit, we'd like to do something in the fall, but we want to have these conversations with folks to see what are their concerns and how we can address them creatively. So thank you for your time. I ended it right at 12.
Thanks so much, Demi. We will be sending out the recording of this session, as well as the links that were included in Demi's presentation, as well as a reminder about the next 2 sessions that are coming up next week on August 5th and on August 19th. Thank you so much for coming and presenting today. And I encourage you all to continue thinking through your questions, sharing them with the Safe Routes Partnership, as well as our leadership committee here in Oregon. And again, really appreciate everybody for joining us today, and enjoy your lunch. And I'll be sending out this recording hopefully by tomorrow, so that you all can share it and take a look at those resources.
Thank you.
All right, thanks Demi, and thanks everybody.
Thank you.